Welcome back viewers, ladies, gentlemen, non-binaries and anyone with ears or other sound detection organs. Hope you enjoy. We are continuing with Going Native, written by Uncle Sealing. Going Native, Chapter 78. The SUV bounced along I-84, headlights illuminating the cracked roadway. It seemed that Utah didn't have fixing up the roads high on its list of responsibilities. They were almost to Provo, just south of Salt Lake City. I'm telling you, it'll be easy. This old bastard won't know what hit him. The voice was rough, tainted with a sadistic glee. Cool it, Morris. We're just supposed to talk to him. Lewis tried to keep calm as he gripped the wheel. He was still seething over being saddled with this asshole, but they just had to live with it. Oh, he'll talk. He'll squeal like a pig by the time I'm through with him. Will you put that away? If Lewis hits another pothole, I don't want to be stabbed. Steve was sitting in the back seat with Morris and sounded panicked. The rental vehicle didn't have a passenger seat. It had been removed to give any Shilvati passengers more legroom. Instead, Lewis had the front and Morris and Steve had to share the back. Morris grumbled as the knife, 20 centimeters of purple steel, slid back into his coat. Did I ever tell you how I got that knife? Yes. Now shut up, we're almost there. They pulled smoothly into the parking lot of the Value Save Motel. There was the little blue sports car, right where the motel's owner had said it would be. The bulletins had been out since White's daughter had escaped Albuquerque, something Lewis was privately happy about, since that whole debacle had filtered a lot of assholes out of the organization, and the motel owner had made a hefty finder's fee for his phone call. As the SUV pulled into a space, Morris jumped free. Lewis got everything settled and stepped out just in time to hear a screeching sound from the direction of the sports car. He turned to see Morris finish scratching a deep gouge in the paint on the passenger side with his knife. Steve was standing next to him, hands up in panic. Dude, stop it. Steve pleaded. Morris took a moment to ram the knife through the fabric roof, then dragged it across the rag top in a long slice before putting the knife away. Fine. Just stay back and, I don't know, act menacing. We'll do the talking. Lewis was ostensibly in charge, but Morris didn't work for the same number and didn't seem to give a shit what Lewis wanted. The door to Unit 4 was cracked open, an extension cord running from it back to the blue car. For just a moment, Lewis pictured Morris trying to slice the cord and getting electrocuted. It was nice, but unfortunately he wasn't quite that dumb. Lewis stood in front of the numbered wood panel, squared his shoulders, and knocked. Just a second. The voice was muffled, and after a few thunks a man who looked to be in his early to mid-40s opened the door. Eustace Grant was taller than Lewis, almost as tall as Morris, and was wearing nothing but a pair of boxer shorts and his prosthetic leg. Huge surgical scars covered his chest and right shoulder, and the man's eyebrows raised in surprise at seeing the three standing at his door. One eye was hazel and the other was the gold on black of a Shilvati. It was more than a little disturbing. Before Lewis could say anything, Morris pushed past and shoved Grant. Their target stumbled backwards against a dresser, almost losing balance completely on his prosthetic leg. A small dog, one of those cute Pomeranian puffballs, ran up to Morris barking excitedly. Lewis didn't know what to do. None of this was to plan. Then Morris punted the little dog across the room. Before Lewis or Steve could react, Grant had tackled Morris. He just flung himself at the tame killer, knocking them both to the ground. This was just getting worse and worse. If Morris killed Grant, 14 would be furious with them and with 5 for making them bring Morris along. It could cause serious damage to the organization. And there was no way that Morris would. Never mind. Grant was on top, straddling Morris's waist, holding the man's head by the hair and swinging his right fist down like a hammer squarely into Morris's face. After 2 hits, Morris went limp. Grant kept going for several more. When he finally finished, panting from the exertion and covered in splatters of blood, he looked up at the other two, rage in his mismatched eyes. Lewis held up both hands placatingly. He glanced at Steve, but he just looked sick. All three looked at each other, frozen in time until a low growl caught all their attention. "Pom, no." The dog ignored Grant. It had latched onto Morris's ear and was trying desperately to rip it off, growling all the while. Morris didn't react at all. "Pom? No. Is he dead?" Steve's voice was choked. His skin was a sickly grey-green and he seemed to be on the verge of throwing up. This wasn't the sort of thing Lewis and Steve dealt with. Grant pressed a couple fingers against Morris's neck. "Not yet." "What do you mean, not yet?" "If he doesn't wake up in the next 10 or 20 seconds, he has a major concussion and possibly a brain bleed. He'll need immediate medical attention or he will likely die." Grant tried to stand up, but with the prosthetic and the missing foot on the other side he seemed to be having a hard time of it. Lewis reached down a hand and Grant took it with a nod, accepting the pull-up before sitting down on the edge of the bed. The dog followed and the man grabbed it, placing the now reddened puppy on the bed beside him. Lewis wiped his bloody hand on his pant leg as best he could and tried not to think about it. After 20 seconds, Grant leaned over towards the bedside table. Lewis felt his stomach clench as he noticed the huge revolver. Grant picked up a phone, leaving the gun alone for now. "This is Eustace Grant. I am at the Value Save Motel in Provo, room 4. A man forced his way into my room and attacked me and my dog. I beat the shit out of him and he needs immediate medical attention. Definitely a major concussion, likely a bleed in his brain." "No, he didn't say anything." "Just hurry." "Yes, this number is fine. I'll be here." He put the pad down, then started checking the dog over. "Well, Lewis cleared his throat. "Tried again. We came here to have a chat with you. To see where your loyalties are." "And him?" The prosthetic leg kicked Morris inside. "Muscle we were forced to take along. He wasn't supposed to do anything." "He's an asshole," Steve interrupted. "So, which number are you two with?" Lewis froze at the man's words. "We can't say. But he isn't with us. There are factions and some are more aggressive than others." Grant nodded, then looked at the side of his hand. "Would you mind grabbing my first aid kit out of that bag?" He pointed to a battered duffel sitting on the dresser. "I cut the side of my hand on that shitbird's teeth." While Grant bandaged his wound, Lewis tried to find the words he had been planning to say. Nothing had gone the way he had hoped. "Our organization, which you obviously know at least something about, has the long-term goal of freeing the Earth from Shilvati tyranny. Some of our work is subtle, and some is." He glanced at Morris's still form. "Less so. You are a mystery to us. You were missing during the invasion, and appeared suddenly out of nowhere in a Denver military hospital. That hospital suffered some sort of event while you were there, then you moved to a shill-backed weapons research facility. You loaned a very expensive custom sports car to a young woman fleeing anti-shill forces, and you killed 3 humans attempting to assassinate an interior agent." Grant just stared. "We want to know just how involved you are with the Shilvati." Steve seemed calmer now, less like he was about to lose it. "You seem to be loyal to them, but generally speaking people with your predilections have a lot to lose in the Shilvati regime." The silence dragged on for a few moments before the man finally replied. "Okay." Grant seemed disinclined to say anything more. "That's not an answer. You didn't ask a question, and I'm not obligated to have a chat with you." Grant glanced at the alarm clock on the bedside table. I would highly suggest you two get going if you want to be gone before the cops get here. Lewis pulled a card from his pocket and handed it over to the seated figure, then turned to leave. This whole thing was a shit show and the least they could do was get away clean. Steve stopped, letting Lewis pass him. It looked like the shaken man had something to say. Morris, the guy on the floor. He has a knife on him. Claims he got it from a Shilvati clerk at the Denver military base. He tricked her into following him to a hotel, then killed her and dumped the body. He's done a lot of horrible shit. Steve took a moment to swallow. He's a fucking psychopath and a disgrace to the human race. Grant nodded. I'll take care of it. Askell jerked awake at the pounding on his door. Jessica grumbled sleepily beside him, her arm pulling tighter against him, but the noise continued and he eventually managed to squirm free. He stumbled through his living room and pulled the door open, blinking sleepily at the two figures looming huge in the brightly lit medical wing. Get dressed and grab your gear, Jelsai ordered. Stace was attacked. Attacked? Askell flung the door the rest of the way open. He heard a shuffling noise behind him and turned to see Jessica standing in her underwear in the doorway to the bedroom, listening to the conversation. What happened? Some asshole tried to force his way into Stace's hotel room and kicked potato. Stace beat the goddess-loving shit out of the guy. He claims he wasn't hurt, but you know Stace. Ella smirked, but Askell could see the nervousness in her purple face. There were dark rings under her eyes, and the small smile vanished almost as soon as it appeared. She had been woken up abruptly as well. Almost on cue, the sound of thunder filled the room, followed by a roar of rain outside. Askell turned to find Jessica, still in just her underwear, pulling a poncho and an umbrella out of his closet along with his boots. She looked across at the two Shilvati. What else do you need? Just Askell, Jelsai replied. My pilot is getting the shuttle prepped. I doubt we need any firepower. It took Jessica pulling at Askell's arm to realize that he was frozen in place. His brain hadn't quite caught up with the situation. He followed her back into the bedroom and started mechanically pulling on whatever Jessica tossed his way. Finally, ready to go and firing on all cylinders, Askell flew past Jelsai and Ella into the medical wing. The case he had taken on the trip to orbit wasn't unpacked yet, and he simply dumped all the anti-nausea tablets, splints, and compression wraps onto a table. In their place went a portable medical scanner, painkillers, antibiotics, medical patches and spray, and a few trauma dressings. After remembering who his patient was, he added some anti-anxiety medication and light sedatives. As he latched the case, he heard Jessica behind him. Arms up. Askell raised his arms and a poncho slipped over him. He shouldered the case, grabbed the umbrella, and ran through the rain just behind Jelsai and Ella. Less than 10 minutes after knocking on Askell's door, the shuttle was off. Jelsai stomped out of the shuttle just in time to see some local militia bitch dragging a mostly naked Stace to a security vehicle. The rain was pouring down and she apparently hadn't even seen fit to give him a chance to get dressed. Ella followed, Askell close by and hiding under his umbrella. Their landing in the parking lot, taking up most of it and hanging off well into the street, had drawn attention, and the Shilvati woman dragging Stace stopped long enough to shove the man into the vehicle and slam the door. She jogged away from the armored cruiser and towards the trio. Can I help you? There was no question in her voice. Clearly she was not in the mood to deal with whoever just showed up. Jelsai could understand, usually, but not now. I'm Investigator Chelza. We're here to pick up Eustace Grant. Jelsai pointed at the cruiser. Do you have any paperwork for the transfer? The woman continued to stare Jelsai down. Of course I don't have paperwork. He asked me to take him home. Ah. I see. The militiawoman took a moment to light a smoke, taking no precautions to avoid blowing the smoke in Jelsai's face. It was infuriating. Well, your stiff murdered somebody, so you can't have him. It was self-defense. Elora broke in. Jelsai took a moment to glance her way. Elora's face was starting to go dark, eyes narrowing. If a fight broke out, Jelsai could count on her. So you claim? He hasn't said a word since we arrived and the crime scene looks suspicious as hell. No major signs of struggle, nothing trashed, no sign of a break-in. No vehicle for the victim, so he probably arrived with your friend. Both the perp and the victim were heavily armed. He's coming with us until he gets a little more talkative. She took a moment to raise a hand, pointing at Eskel. You. Stop moving. The Helcom froze halfway to the militia cruiser. I'm his nurse. He might be hurt. He's fine. She took a moment to look Eskel up and down lecherously before dismissing him with a shake of her head. Nobody is going near him until we've interrogated him. Listen. She took a moment to give what Jelsai imagined she thought was a maternal look. You should stay away from the human stiffs. They are bad news. You think you've got someone who loves you, but it always turns out to be some kind of lie. I've seen bad things happen to a lot of girls because they trusted a human. Males shouldn't be like this, most of the cases we have to deal with are stiff-on-stiff violence. Besides, you could do a lot better than that one. Cute face or not, I don't think I've ever seen one that fucked up. Jelsai heard a popping noise, barely audible under the roar of the rain, and turned her head slightly. Elora's fists were so tight that the knuckles were cracking. Honestly, she felt the same way, but Jelsai was nowhere near corrupt enough to beat the shit out of a cop. Even if she really, really wanted to. Where's Pom? Eskel suddenly asked. Where's his dog? We locked it in the bathroom. She took a moment to think, then nodded. Might as well give it to you. Stay here. Do not approach the vehicle. While the militiawoman stomped off back towards the motel, Jelsai considered her options. She wasn't the sort of person to just ignore the law. With her connections she could probably force the situation and get out of it, but what would Stace want? She wished she could ask him. Would he think less of her for pulling strings? The militiawoman stomped back through the puddle-filled parking lot, a drowned-looking Pomeranian tucked under one arm. She tossed the dog at Eskel with no warning, and in the course of trying to catch it the Helcom ended up losing his umbrella. The dog was so wet it was like throwing a sponge, water splashing all across Eskel's face and chest. He was soaked in seconds in the freezing downpour and immediately began to shiver. Shit. Shit shit shit. Elora, take Eskel back to the shuttle. See if you can warm him up. Jelsai turned towards the militiawoman and glared. I will be seeing you again. Then she turned, following Elora at a jog as she carried Eskel. Pom followed along at a tiny, splashing run. Jelsai got into the shuttle just in time to see Elora stripping Eskel. The young Helcom looked to almost be asleep with how little he was moving, his grey skin pale. The emergency kit had heated blankets, Jelsai knew. She grabbed them and yelled to the pilot, who probably broke half the windows at the motel getting them clear of the parking lot. The first blanket began to radiate warmth as she tossed it to Elora. The large Marine wrapped Eskel up tight and began rubbing his arms and chest through the fabric. Jelsai stared at the shivering boy and considered. He seemed to be recovering, but should they take him to a hospital? What did he need? Jessica answered the call halfway through the first ring. Eskel is soaking wet and freezing. Get the sauna heated up as high as it will go and as humid as you can make it. We're heading back. On it. Jessica's voice was the calm of someone who is unbelievably upset and holding it down. There seemed to be a lot of that going on. Where's Stace? Eskel's voice was quiet and slow, barely audible even in the quiet of the shuttle. We'll get him, don't worry. He's okay. Jelsai took another blanket and started wiping the moisture off of the soft grey skin of Eskel's face, drying his hair. Let's get you warm first. Jessica is waiting for you. Okay. Eskel smiled lazily as his eyes slipped closed. Jelsai panicked, but a couple fingertips to the side of the neck reassured her. He wasn't dead, just asleep. End of chapter. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss any episode and do all the other YouTube stuff, visit and support the author, and I'll see you next time. If you didn't enjoy, comment on what I can do better. And as usual, have a wonderful day.